Keep your eyes on the hallway visible through the living room of a rented house in Avondale, Cincinnati. The date is October 7, 2023. A fixed indoor camera records the front door opening at 21:58. 33-year-old Lenora Kincaid steps inside, keys in her hand. She pauses just inside the doorway, facing the hallway, as if listening. Less than 15 seconds later, a shadow crosses the frame. The image jolts. Audio captures a single blunt impact followed by a brief gasp. Lenora collapses partially out of view. A person stays low, grips her arms, and pulls her down the hallway. Seconds later, a second camera feed briefly goes dark. When police arrive, Lenora is found dead in the bathroom. The scene appears disturbed, but valuable items remain untouched. One shoe is missing. The surveillance system continues recording. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Cincinnati, Ohio. October 7, 2023. Darrell Kincaid, 34, reported to Mercy West Hospital at 22:40 to begin his scheduled overnight shift. His position was surgical supply stocker, a non-clinical role responsible for receiving sealed shipments, verifying item codes against digital manifests, and restocking operating units and storage rooms. The work followed strict protocols and allowed limited interaction with other staff. Darrow had been assigned to night shift since 2018, a schedule that reduced oversight and placed responsibility on individual accuracy rather than supervision. Lenora Kincaid, 33, known to coworkers as Nori, worked standard weekday hours as a billing coordinator for a regional dental services chain operating across southwest Ohio. Her role involved processing insurance claims, reviewing third-party equipment invoices, and reconciling monthly ledgers prior to compliance reviews. She had access to internal accounting systems and cloud-based records but did not authorize payments independently. Her supervisors described her work as consistent and detail-oriented. Lenora had held the position since May 2019. The couple lived together in Avondale, Cincinnati, in a rented two-story house owned by a private landlord. The lease listed both names and had been renewed in March 2023. The location reduced commute time for both. Their living arrangement followed a stable pattern: shared meals when schedules allowed, shared responsibility for rent and utilities, and no prior involvement with law enforcement or civil disputes. Bank records showed a joint checking account used for household expenses and 2 individual debit cards linked to it. The first documented point of internal conflict occurred in early September 2023. On September 9, Darrow obtained a short-term payday loan for $1,200 through an online lender. The loan was issued to his personal email but debited from the joint checking account. Darrow later stated the loan was used to pay for a vehicle repair necessary for commuting to work. He did not inform Lenora at the time, expecting to repay the amount before it affected shared finances. On September 14 at 6:12, Lenora received an automated overdraft notification from the bank indicating insufficient funds in the joint account. The alert corresponded with a scheduled utility payment. When she reviewed the transaction history later that morning, she identified the payday loan withdrawal and associated service fees. That evening, at approximately 18:45, Lenora confronted Darrow in the house. According to both accounts, the discussion lasted less than 10 minutes. There were no raised voices and no physical contact. Darrow acknowledged taking the loan without disclosure. Lenora stated that undisclosed debt exposed her to financial risk. Following that conversation, changes occurred in how they managed shared information. Lenora opened a separate checking account for her salary deposits on September 18. Darrow redirected a portion of his wages to a prepaid debit card. They discontinued sharing device passwords and stopped syncing calendars. Their daily schedules remained outwardly unchanged, but communication narrowed to functional exchanges regarding rent, utilities, and basic errands. In the final week of September, Darrow began to notice deviations from Lenora's routine. On 2 occasions, she returned home later than her usual time without prior notice. On another, she mentioned an unscheduled errand after work. None of these instances were corroborated by absences or disciplinary notes from her employer. Darrow did not raise formal objections. He later stated that he began mentally recording details rather than asking questions. On September 26, at approximately 22:10, Darrow observed a notification appear briefly on Lenora's phone screen while it was charging in the living room. The sender name consisted of unfamiliar initials followed by a heart emoji. Darrow stated he did not see message content. When he asked about it, Lenora replied that it was work-related and dismissed further discussion. Darrow did not pursue clarification. Between September 27 and October 6, 2023, Darrow Kincaid altered his daily behavior in ways that were later documented through interviews, device logs, and witness statements. He began tracking Lenora Kincaid's movements against her stated schedule, noting the times she left work, returned home, and left again. He wrote observations in a notes application on his phone, recording dates and approximate times. These entries focused on deviations rather than patterns, returns later than 1900 hours, brief outings without stated destinations, and days when her phone went unanswered for extended periods. On September 29, Darrow contacted the property owner, Rashad Bellamy, 46, a self-employed property manager who handled maintenance and lease renewals for several houses in Avondale. Darrow stated he had concerns about unauthorized access to the house and asked whether any duplicate keys had been issued. Bellamy checked his records and said that in April 2023 Lenora had requested an additional key, explaining at the time that she needed a spare for emergencies. The request was processed without Darrow's involvement. Bellamy reported that Darrow appeared surprised but did not pursue further details. On October 1, Darrow contacted his cousin Basil Hargrove, 36, a warehouse loader employed at a distribution center in Fairfield, Ohio. Basil had prior experience installing consumer electronics and had previously helped relatives set up home networks. Darrow asked about inexpensive surveillance options, stating he was concerned about thefts in the area. According to Basil's later account, Darrow framed the request as precautionary and did not mention Lenora. Basil recommended a consumer-grade Wi-Fi camera kit and agreed to assist with installation. The equipment was purchased on October 2 using Darrow's prepaid debit card. On October 3, Basil visited the house in Avondale during the afternoon while Lenora was at work. He installed 3 cameras, one positioned to capture the front door entry, one covering the rear steps leading into the house, and one in the living room oriented toward the hallway that connected to the bedrooms and bathroom. Basil connected the cameras to the home router and created 2 user profiles within the system, one labeled as administrator and one as standard access. He retained the administrator credentials temporarily to complete configuration. Darrow observed the installation process closely. Basil later stated that Darrow asked specific questions about coverage gaps, camera refresh rates, and remote access. Basil explained where blind spots existed due to walls and angles. At the end of the visit, Basil provided Darrow with access credentials and demonstrated how to view live feeds and stored clips from his phone. During this same period, Lenora's behavior changed in ways later noted by others. At her workplace in Blue Ash, Talia Morrow, 29, a dental billing associate who worked in the adjacent cubicle, observed that Lenora began stepping outside to take personal calls rather than using her desk phone. Talia stated this started in late September and occurred several times per week. Lenora did not share details about the calls and appeared distracted afterward. No disciplinary action was taken, and her work output remained consistent. At home, Darrow questioned Lenora about her schedule changes on 2 occasions, on October 3 and October 5. According to Darrow, Lenora responded by accusing him of monitoring her and said his questions were intrusive. The discussions did not escalate further. Darrow did not disclose the presence of the cameras. A neighbor, Imani Drayton, 41, a babysitter who lived 2 houses down, later reported that during the first week of October she observed Lenora sitting alone in her car outside the house on multiple evenings. The vehicle was parked with the engine running. Imani stated that Lenora remained inside the car for several minutes before entering the house and did not interact with anyone during those times. From October 3 onward, Darrow accessed the camera feeds repeatedly throughout the day and night. System logs later showed dozens of logins per day, often during overnight hours when he was at work. He reviewed live feeds and recorded clips but did not save or export footage during this period. There were no recorded alerts of forced entry or external intrusion. On Saturday, October 7th, during the afternoon, Lenora told Darrow she planned to go out that evening to clear her head. She did not specify a destination or time of return. Darrow did not object and did not ask further questions. That evening, instead of leaving the house or attempting to follow her, Darrow remained inside and monitored the camera system from his phone and laptop, focusing on the living room and rear entry feeds. He later stated that he believed observation would provide clarity that conversation no longer could. On Saturday, October 7th, 2023, Lenora Kincaid left the house in Avondale at approximately 1840. She was seen by a neighbor entering her vehicle and driving away alone. No destination was provided to Darrow Kincaid, and no return time was discussed. Darrow remained in the house. Phone records later showed that from 1845 onward, his mobile device accessed the home camera system repeatedly through the evening. At 21:58, Lenora returned. The living room camera recorded her entering through the front door. She was wearing a jacket, carrying a purse on her right shoulder, and holding keys in her left hand. She closed the door behind her and remained standing near the entrance for several seconds. Her body position suggested she was facing toward the hallway that led to the bathroom and bedrooms. No other person was visible in the frame at that moment. At 21:59, a shadow moved across the lower portion of the camera image from the hallway direction. The camera feed shook slightly, consistent with vibration rather than repositioning. Audio from the same camera recorded a short, dull impact sound followed by a brief vocalization lasting less than 1 second. Lenora fell forward and out of the camera's central view, with only part of her lower body visible near the edge of the frame. A figure entered partial view at floor level. Due to the camera angle and limited lighting, the person's face was not visible. The individual remained crouched and pulled Lenora by the arms toward the hallway. The movement was continuous and lasted approximately 12 seconds. No additional verbal exchange was captured. At 22 hours and 2 seconds, the living room feed showed the hallway empty. At 2200 hours, the rear step camera feed went dark for approximately 8 seconds before resuming. The interruption was consistent with the lens being obstructed rather than a power or network failure. No exterior movement was visible before or after the interruption. Darrow later stated that he was watching the live feed when the incident occurred. System logs confirmed active viewing from his device during that minute. At 22:01, Darrow's phone placed a call to emergency services. The call connected at 22 hours 1 minute and 18 seconds. Darrow reported that his wife had been attacked and was unresponsive. He stated that he was not at the house at the time and was returning. Location data later showed he was already inside the residence. Police units arrived at the Avondale address at 22:09. Lenora was found in the bathroom. She was unresponsive and pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head. Defensive injuries were noted on her forearms and hands, indicating a struggle. The house showed signs of disturbance that investigators later described as inconsistent. Several drawers in the bedroom and living room were pulled open. Jewelry items were scattered on a dresser and floor, but higher value items remained in place. No electronics were missing. One of Lenora's shoes was not located in the house. Investigators noted an absence of forced entry. Multiple surfaces appeared to have been wiped, though no cleaning supplies were found nearby. Detective Marcellus Quill, 47, a homicide investigator with the Cincinnati Police Department, was assigned to the case. He conducted the initial walkthrough and secured the camera system. Quill reviewed the recorded footage multiple times during the first night. In his notes, he observed that the camera blind spots aligned precisely with the hallway corners and bathroom entrance. He also noted that the disorder in the house appeared selective rather than random. Quill interviewed Darrow shortly after midnight. Darrow described discovering the attack through the camera feed and calling for help immediately. Quill asked about the cameras, their placement, and who had installed them. Darrow stated they were installed for security and that his cousin had assisted. Quill recorded Darrow's demeanor as controlled and detailed. Over the next several hours, Quill canvassed the surrounding block. Imani Drayton reported seeing a dark-colored sedan parked on the street earlier that evening, roughly between 21:30 and 2200 hours. She could not identify the driver. Quill requested traffic footage from a nearby intersection. The footage showed a black sedan leaving the area shortly after 2200 hours. The image quality allowed only a partial view of the license plate, insufficient for immediate identification but clear enough to determine the vehicle type. By the morning of October 8, the working theory was targeted violence staged to resemble a burglary. The presence of the cameras, rather than clarifying events, raised further questions about access, timing, and intent. On October 8, 2023, investigators began analyzing the partial license plate captured by the traffic camera near the Avondale address. Using frame-by-frame enhancement and vehicle registration databases, analysts narrowed the plate to a black Nissan Altima registered in Hamilton County. By the afternoon, the vehicle was identified as belonging to Keandre Lattimore, 38, a medical equipment sales representative based in Dayton, Ohio. Lattimore's employment records showed that he serviced dental practices across southwest Ohio, including several offices under contract with Lenora Kincaid's employer. Phone records obtained with a warrant showed that between August 22 and October 6, Lenora and Lattimore exchanged 12 phone calls. All were brief, ranging from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. There were no calls on the day of the homicide. No text messages between the two were recovered from Lenora's device, but investigators noted gaps in message logs consistent with deletion. A digital forensic review of Lenora's cloud storage revealed a deleted note created on October 2 and removed the same day. The note contained a single line, "If he finds out, I'm done." The note was not shared and had no title. Metadata showed it was edited once and never reopened. Investigators could not determine the intended recipient or context from the note alone. Detective Marcellus Quill visited Lenora's workplace on October 9. Talia Morrow confirmed that Lattimore had visited the office twice in late September, presenting himself as a vendor resolving billing discrepancies related to equipment leasing. Talia stated that during the second visit, Lenora appeared tense and requested to speak with Lattimore outside. She did not return for several minutes. Security footage from the office parking lot corroborated this account. The footage showed Lenora standing beside a black Nissan Altima and handing a manila envelope to a man later identified as Lattimore. The interaction lasted approximately 1 minute. At the end of the exchange, Lattimore stepped closer, and Lenora moved backward, increasing the distance between them before returning to the building. No audio was available. Quill interviewed Lattimore on October 10. During the initial interview, Lattimore denied being in Avondale on the night of October 7 and stated that his interactions with Lenora were strictly professional. When Quill presented the traffic camera image showing a black Altima leaving the area shortly after 2200 hours, Lattimore acknowledged that he had driven through the neighborhood. He stated that he had met Lenora earlier that evening to discuss billing issues that he believed were affecting his commission payments. He denied entering the house or being involved in any physical altercation. Lattimore's explanation was documented but not corroborated by independent evidence. He consented to a vehicle inspection. No visible damage was found, and no biological material was immediately recovered from the interior. Investigators retained the vehicle for further forensic processing. While examining the crime scene evidence, forensic technicians identified skin cells collected from a smear along the hallway wall leading toward the bathroom. DNA analysis matched the sample to Basil Hargrove, 36, Darrow Kincaid's cousin. The match was confirmed through a prior entry in a state database related to a misdemeanor arrest from 2016. Basil was interviewed on October 11. He acknowledged installing the camera system in Darrow's house on October 3 and stated that he had been inside the residence earlier on October 7 to help troubleshoot a connectivity issue. He claimed he left well before Lenora returned that night. Basil demonstrated familiarity with the camera layout and acknowledged knowing where blind spots existed. He denied any involvement in the homicide. During the interview, Quill observed that Basil had several small cuts on his hands and knuckles. Basil attributed them to warehouse work earlier in the week. When asked to provide a detailed timeline of his movements on October 7th, Basil's account changed multiple times regarding exact departure times and locations. Phone location data showed his device moving through Avondale that evening, though not conclusively at the time of the attack. On October 12, 2023, Darrell Kincaid was brought in for a second recorded interview at the Cincinnati Police Department. Detective Marcellus Quill presented him with a structured timeline derived from phone records, router logs, and camera metadata. Darrell repeated his earlier statement that he had witnessed the attack on the live camera feed and called emergency services immediately afterward. Quill responded by placing call detail records on the table. The records showed that the first audible impact captured by the living room camera occurred at 21:59. Darrell's phone did not place a call to emergency services until 22:06. The 7-minute interval was unaccounted for in Darrell's prior explanation. When asked to explain the delay, Darrell stated that he was disoriented and attempting to process what he was seeing. Quill noted that during this same interval, Darrell's phone accessed the home router settings application twice. Further analysis of the home network revealed that at 2200 hours coinciding with the moment the rear camera feed went dark, an administrator-level login occurred. The login credentials matched the administrator profile originally created by Basil Hargrove during the camera installation. The session lasted 9 seconds and ended just before the rear feed resumed. Darrell denied having access to the administrator profile and stated that Basil must have logged in remotely. Phone records showed Basil's device active in the Avondale area at that time. Based on these findings, Quill obtained search warrants for Basil Hargrove's vehicle and a rented storage unit registered in his name in Fairfield, Ohio. The searches were executed on October 13th. Inside the storage unit, officers found sealed boxes labeled as orthopedic implants bearing inventory codes matching those used by Mercy West Hospital. Serial numbers confirmed that at least 12 items had been removed from hospital inventory without authorization over a 6-month period. Also recovered from the storage unit were latex gloves containing Lenora Kincaid's blood, one of Lenora's missing shoes, and a torn corner of a manila envelope. The torn edge matched the envelope seen in the parking lot footage outside Lenora's workplace. In Basil's vehicle, investigators found additional gloves, a pry tool, and cleaning wipes consistent with residue found at the crime scene. Confronted with the physical evidence, Basil was interviewed again on October 14th. After several hours, he admitted to participating in an ongoing theft scheme involving medical implants. According to his statement, Darrow had access to inventory at Mercy West and removed items incrementally to avoid detection. Basil transported and stored the items. The implants were resold through intermediaries connected to Keandre Lattimore, who facilitated introductions to buyers but did not handle the items directly. Basil stated that in late September, Lenora discovered billing discrepancies related to equipment invoices that did not align with delivery records. She began compiling documentation and told Darrow she intended to report the issue internally. Basil said Darrow panicked and believed exposure would lead to criminal charges and job loss. Darrow instructed Basil to retrieve a manila envelope Lenora had prepared and to make the house appear as though it had been burglarized. According to Basil's confession, he entered the house on October 7th using a spare key Lenora had previously obtained. He waited inside, intending to search for the envelope and leave before her return. Lenora arrived earlier than expected. She encountered Basil in the hallway and attempted to flee. A physical struggle followed. Basil stated that during the confrontation, he struck Lenora once with sufficient force to cause her to collapse. He realized she was unresponsive and attempted to continue staging the scene before leaving. Formal charges were filed in Hamilton County Court in late October 2023. Darrow Kincaid was indicted on counts of aggravated murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple felony theft charges related to the removal of medical property from Mercy West Hospital. Basil Hargrove was charged separately with murder, theft, and evidence tampering. Keandre Lattimore faced fraud and conspiracy charges connected to the resale of stolen medical equipment. In November 2023, Basil entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. In exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation, he agreed to provide a full account of the theft operation and his role in Lenora Kincaid's death. During sworn testimony, Basil described how Darrow identified items within hospital inventory systems that could be removed without triggering immediate audits. Basil transported the items and stored them off-site. Payments were routed through intermediaries introduced by Lattimore, with proceeds split unevenly, Darrow receiving the larger share. Basil testified in detail about the surveillance system. He explained how the cameras were positioned, how administrator access functioned, and how Darrow asked specifically about blind spots and remote logins. Basil stated that on October 7th, Darrow instructed him to retrieve documentation Lenora had assembled and to make the house appear disturbed. Basil acknowledged that Darrow did not instruct him to harm Lenora but admitted he proceeded despite knowing she might return. Keandre Lattimore cooperated with investigators after his arrest. In court filings, he confirmed that he connected Basil to buyers seeking discounted medical implants and received referral payments. He denied knowledge of any plan involving Lenora's death. His testimony established the financial motive underlying the theft operation and corroborated transaction records introduced by the prosecution. At trial, Lenora's co-worker Talia Morrow testified regarding Lenora's behavior in late September and early October. She authenticated the deleted note recovered from Lenora's cloud account and stated that Lenora had told her she was preparing documentation for an internal audit meeting. Talia testified that Lenora appeared anxious but determined and had expressed concern about potential retaliation if discrepancies were discovered. Financial records presented to the jury showed Darrow's increasing personal debt, including the payday loan and additional short-term borrowing. Bank statements documented unexplained cash deposits inconsistent with his salary. Prosecutors also introduced evidence that Darrow had increased Lenora's life insurance policy in August 2023, listing himself as the sole beneficiary. The policy change was processed without Lenora's direct involvement, using previously granted authorization. The defense argued that Darrow was an accidental witness who panicked after observing an unexpected crime. They claimed the delay in contacting emergency services resulted from shock and confusion and that Basil acted independently. Detective Marcellus Quill testified to rebut this narrative. He presented a minute-by-minute timeline showing the gap between the assault and the emergency call, the administrator login during the camera interruption, and the selective staging of the scene. Quill stated that these elements indicated coordination rather than coincidence. After deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all major counts. Darrow Kincaid was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after several decades, consistent with state guidelines. Basil Hargrove received a reduced sentence under the plea agreement. Lattimore was sentenced separately on fraud-related charges. As part of the case file, Detective Quill preserved copies of the documents Lenora had compiled. Among them was a final handwritten page dated the morning of October 7, 2023. The line read, "If something happens, start with Darrow." The statement reflected her understanding of the risk she faced and provided context to the events that followed. With that record entered into evidence, the case concluded with a clear account of motive, action, and responsibility.